So I closed my eyes, and when I did, I felt myself completely separate from my body, but I was taken, instead of like, a pillar of light or a tunnel of light like I was expecting, like what had happened to my stepmother, I was taken to right into my life review. I was surrounded by this membrane that was kind of yellow, but illuminated, and there were red lines running through it. And I didn't realize until later what this space was that I was in. And then suddenly I felt myself like this and being squeezed. And then I was overtaken with this experience of euphoria and immense love, like emanating from myself, emanating from outside of myself. And then suddenly I was being held like this and cradled in a hand. And I'm looking up at this woman who looks exactly like me. So I was really confused, because suddenly I'm experiencing not just my own experience, but the experience of this woman as well. And so it took a second to realize I'm looking at my mother. I look exactly like my mother. And my mother had left when I was 9 years old. I had grown up feeling like she didn't want me, she didn't love me, she didn't care about me. She was self-absorbed, consumed with herself, like who leaves their two little girls. And suddenly what I experienced was very clearly she wanted me and she loved me. This was my first inclination that my own personal myopic view of myself, how I fit into this world, the way the world works, other people, was one point of view. This is my first inclination of that. And this woman looks away and she's speaking to somebody who I think was my father, actually. But it was just very clear I was wanted and I was loved. So I was taken out of that experience and into every single experience of my life in chronological order. And I experienced parts of it with more depth, more color, more time. But the big thing was that I was experiencing this from all points of view, not just my own. And it was clear that some of these experiences were more important than others. Looking back, what I know now is that those experiences were the ones that I needed to learn from. I had some horrible things that happened, but I was able to see that we're all just going through our own life, our own experience, doing the best we can with what we got. And, I was able to see, my goodness, my mother was 18 years old when I was born. What 18-year-old is equipped to raise two little girls, for one thing, let alone deal with life? And I got all the way to the end of my life, and this happened like this. And it was like, at some point, I realized I'm viewing it on a screen that's before me, but it's, interactive. And I get all the way to the point where I am lying on the couch at the very end of my life. And suddenly the screen disappears. I'm surrounded by darkness, but it's not like the way we experience, like the lights are out and you can't see anything. It wasn't like that. It was like space kind of darkness where you can see forever. But I was surrounded by this darkness, and suddenly there was a presence next to me, and I knew it was male. I knew that I knew him, but I couldn't see him. I heard his voice, but it was more like, there was definitely a voice, but it's not like the way we speak. It was like this all-consuming knowing that came upon me. And he said, "This is the life you lived." That was it. There was no drama. There was no significance about it, just fact. These are the facts. So at that point, I realized I'm not in the physical world anymore. And so I had a cousin who passed at 11 years old and grandparents who'd moved on. So I swung my head looking for them, expecting to see them. And there was nobody there. And as I swung my head to the right, I saw that there was a line of teenagers next to me, young people. And there was about 6 of them. I leaned over and I looked at them, and there was a girl, she must have been about 16. And this is before I realized that information is just out there. And so I'm certain now she was 16, that was not me guessing her age by looking at her. That's what she's emanating. And she had this stringy blonde hair. But the most interesting and captivating feature about her was the emptiness and the sadness and the grief that had been just dwindled down to nothingness. Like there was nothing there, no hope, no nothing. And I had the thought, what could be so bad in your life that, you would choose to leave this world. And it was at that point I realized, oh, wow, we've all done the same thing. We've all ended our lives. And so I'm leaning over looking. And as soon as I have that thought, the kid that's standing right next to me looks down at me. He's really tall. He's got on a white t-shirt, black leather vest, and black combat boots. And his hair is dyed black and spiked. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's very interesting. I wouldn't think that these physical traits, especially things like clothing or things you've done to your hair, would, follow through the veil and be with you on the other side. And it wasn't until later that I realized that it was my own thoughts that actually influenced the particular near-death experience that I had. So in that moment, as soon as I had the thought, I was taken from them and I flew at the speed of light in an upright position. I have no idea how far. I know I was somewhere on the planet, but just in another dimension. And I start to slow down, and all this is happening like this very quickly. And I start to slow down at about the same time that I see a beltway of people, basically, that are just kind of landing in this space like I am. It stretches for as far as I can see to my left, and it's empty on the right, and we're just filling in, but it's this beltway. I don't know, I'd say maybe 30 feet deep or more, 60 feet deep. I don't know, not very deep. And so I land in this space and I'm looking around, and the first thing I notice is everybody is in filthy white robes, which surprised me. I didn't expect it to be that literal. And the next thing I notice is how disconnected they are from each other. By this point, I'm realizing that thoughts are audible, that you don't have to speak something for it to be known, heard, consumed. But these people don't care what anybody else thinks at all. They're just muttering, and some of them loudly, about their own circumstance. If only you had done this, then I wouldn't be blah, blah, blah. And just completely self-consumed. And at this point, I'm realizing I'm definitely not alive anymore. I'm still in this darkness, in this beltway, but there's this mist. But it's not like a physical mist from this plane. It is a molecular darkness. And it's sucking life. It's sucking life from me, from all those there. And there was this one man in particular, and he was the only one that actually looked at anybody, but he was squatting in his filthy white robes and looking at me. I knew his eyes were blue, but I was seeing in grayscale. And at that point, that's when I realized that I was perceiving things that I shouldn't be able to know. I knew he'd been there for a very, very long time. And I wondered if this was Judas Iscariot. It was just a thought that came from me, just a question. And at that point, and it was that question that propelled me into the next piece of this experience. As soon as I had that thought, I saw a pinpoint of light in the distance. And this light was growing larger, like it was coming towards me. And it was traveling very, very fast. And it stopped outside of this barrier. I knew that I couldn't come in to where I was. And I realized this is a being of light, that he's made of light. He was filled with light. And I knew that this was my Father in heaven. And the guy that was squatting, the man that was squatting, he was the only one that noticed there was something going on, that I was focused on something outside of this space. And he looked and then looked back at me, and he clearly didn't see this. God, there was this immense love, but it was like this fatherly, like, what did you do kind of experience. And he just said, is this what you really want? You can't skip over parts. We've all done this. You don't deserve those kids you were given. You have been up to mischief. You've been trouble. You think that this is a good idea, but you have no idea what you're doing and what awaits you, and like that kind of communication. And as soon as he said, is this what you really want? I had the thought, well, I don't have a choice. I really felt like I had zero choice. That was how far gone I was at that time in my life. I believed I was better off, and that everyone in my life was better off without me. And so it hadn't occurred to me that I'd had a choice. And so I said, and this is like words without speaking. I said, I don't have a choice. I've not had a choice. And as soon as I said that, there was another being next to him, but I could not see this being. I could see pinpricks of light coming through this darkness emanating from him. I knew he was male. I knew him, and I heard his voice, and it was the same voice that had greeted me after my life review. And he said, "Don't you understand? I've done this for you." And as soon as he spoke those words, there were three things that happened. I experienced him experiencing my life, like beginning to end. And in that moment I got, there is somebody else who knows what I've been through and what this was like for me and how I could come to this point where I would choose this over anything else. And then at the same time, I was experiencing being in his body in that moment, and this exchange of energy going back and forth between who I perceived as God the Father and Christ, but it was like Christ downloading my experience to the Father until they were like one. And all this is happening like this. Okay. And as soon as I had that thought, I was like pulled up out of this space. I was hovering above it and traveling back to my body. I was surrounded by these beings of light that were just in this, space like oil and vinegar above this dark space. And I asked this question, what are they doing? And I'm still hearing the voice of God. And I'm told they're helping you. They always have been. They're preparing the earth. They are helping all of you. So as I'm traveling back to my body, it's like I was packed this suitcase of all the things that I would need. Much of the knowledge I acquired during that trip back, I was not permitted to bring with me